I just picked 5 books off my bookshelves that are written by women and had a huge impact on me. You know, one of those books that a long time after you've read it, you still think about it. And also, these are books that I would say really packed a punch in the sense of hitting a nerve. When I was reading them, it really reminded me of something that had happened to me, or it answered a question that I had for a long time. So let's get into them. The first one is The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzburg. This is an Italian author that I recently discovered, and I absolutely love her. I've read several of her books, but this is my favorite so far. So this is a novel that starts out with the woman saying she murdered her husband, and then it kind of flashes back to the early days when she had first met him and how they ended up getting married, etc. There was a specific point in the novel where she mentioned something like his behavior made her believe that he was interested in her. But if she really thought about it, he had never actually said that he loved her, something like that. And I remember that was like a gut punch. I was like, wow, that is like the epitome of manipulation. But this is really good. Highly recommend. The next one I'd like to recommend is Quicksand by Nella Larsen. I read this book last month, and this became an instant favorite. You know, one of those books that as soon as you finish reading it, you're like, wow, this is it. This is going to be on the list of top 10s for this year, and I'll be thinking about this one for a long time. So essentially, Nella Larsen was one of the writers of the Harlem Renaissance. She herself was born to a Danish mother, but her father was from the West Indies. So she had this feeling of belonging to different cultures and trying to figure out where she would really fit in and what her true identity was. And this was so relatable in so many ways. At one point, she tries to go back to Denmark. When she gets there, at first, there's this feeling of, yes, I'm finally with family again, and I can finally find my place. And then after a while, it's like she starts to miss the Black community back in New York. And that feeling of when she was in New York, she couldn't feel comfortable, and so that's why she left. And then when she gets to Denmark, the reverse happens where she starts missing New York. And I just feel like that is so relatable. It's very nuanced. It's very well explained. You understand that for her, this is a true identity crisis because she's never really felt at home anywhere. Of course, things are complicated by the fact that in the US, you have all these issues of social class and racism. And then she also describes really well the fact that the racism in Denmark is like a different brand. You know, it's like everybody loves her and accepts her. She has the same rights technically as anybody else in Denmark. So in that way, she feels like, well, that's an improvement. But then the problem is that people cast her in this role in Denmark where she's supposed to be this exotic woman because she's a Black woman. And she feels like that's not really who she is, but that's who they typecast her as. To me, this is a beautiful book. It's beautifully written. It's deeply relatable regardless of who you are, because this feeling of trying to fit in somewhere, I think, is a universal feeling. I think we can all relate to this. I feel like here in the US, when you fill out those forms, they have the boxes and they want you to check off one of the boxes and what are you, you know, and put yourself in a category. And I think this book explains why the boxes don't make any sense. Highly recommend this one too. The next book on the list is Look at Me by Anita Brookner. this book really hit a nerve with me. If you look at social media posts these days, a lot of people are talking about the difference between solitude and loneliness. And I think this book is an excellent analysis of what goes on in the mind of the lonely person. Some of the pages in this book feel like a dissertation on the anatomy of loneliness. And I feel like it's the kind of book that I want to reread every few years. So I feel like, okay, somebody understands. So this is the story of a young woman who works at an art library. Her mother has recently passed away, so she's living in the same home where she lived with her mom. And she has the same routine that she's had for a while. And she's kind of stuck in a rut. And she has this fantasy that maybe if she could come out of her shell and find some new friends and new things to do, then maybe her life would be more interesting. She describes this narcissistic couple, husband and wife, and the descriptions are so vivid. It feels like, oh my God, I know these people. And so she describes how they sort of start befriending her and invite her to parties and include her in their group, and how she feels so excited and she feels like she finally has somewhere to go and other things to do besides work and home. But at the same time, you really feel like there's something kind of morbid about this couple, something like a weird way that they are somehow using her for their own entertainment. So there's something a little bit eerie about it. And it's a commentary on how certain types of people will use other people and not really think twice. And it also is an excellent depiction of trauma. There are moments in the book where she's feeling traumatized by certain events, and the way she describes what happens to her body, what is she afraid of, what is she obsessing over. It's just really well done. Anita Brookner is quite a discovery for me. I had read Hotel du Lac, which seems to be a very popular novel that some people have read, but I would say this one is the one I would highly recommend by her. And I actually have bought more books by her, so stay tuned on this one. Now, of course, I have to include Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. This is on my list of all-time favorite books. This is a story of a little girl, Annie, growing up in Antigua. It's basically the story of her relationship to her mom and how at first things are going well. She's very close to her mom, and then something goes wrong where somehow the mom starts to reject her. Annie is finding all sorts of ways to help herself survive this terrible loss. My favorite scene in the book is when she writes an essay about a mother and daughter and reads it to the class at school. And it's just so amazing. Jamaica Kincaid has a unique style where she kind of takes you to the edge of magical realism, but then pulls you back because the metaphors are just that powerful. She writes like no other author I've ever read. So I highly recommend this one, Annie John. And there's another one called Lucy, which is a little bit like a sequel to Annie John, which is also excellent. And finally, I wanted to include Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a very well-known Nigerian author, and you may have heard of some of her other books like Americana or Half of a Yellow Sun. Purple Hibiscus holds a special place in my heart because when I was reading it, what happened was I had to stop because there was a scene that was very emotionally charged where the dad is being abusive and the mother is feeling deep empathy for her daughter. And it was just like, wow, that scene somehow, in some strange way, was cathartic for me. I went through some stuff in my childhood, and somehow that scene was almost like the key to the puzzle. And I cannot recommend this book enough. If a book can do this to you, that it can help you reach some form of emotional catharsis, I think it's a sign of a really good book. So I highly recommend this one, Purple Hibiscus. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these authors and which ones you plan to pick up soon, okay? Till next time, happy reading!